Today we're going to start to explore and review how to graph a line, and I would encourage you to follow along with me as we go. Before we start looking at lines, I want to make sure that we know how to make points. So I want you to graph 0, 0. And since we'll have a couple different points, I want you to label it point A. And hopefully, you'd put that point right here. Now, this is the starting point that we base everything from on our graphs. So we call this point the origin, because it's where everything is built from on our graphs. Just a quick note, if there's a problem on these notes that I don't go through, I still want you to do them and try it on your own and check it with me when you turn in your notes, so that I can give feedback on a problem that you've practiced on your own before you go into the homework. And out of nowhere appear points B, C, and D, so I'd like you to pause this and try and put those on your graph. Remember that the first coordinate is X and the second coordinate is Y. So X describes your left and right direction. So positive 2 tells me that we're going to move to the right 2. And positive 5 for Y tells me we're going to move up 5, up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right there for point B. If moving to the right is a positive direction for X, then that means moving to the left is going to be a negative direction for X. And in the same way, moving down for Y is negative. Since negative 7 for X means we move to the left, point C should be there. Positive 2 for Y means we move up 2. Point D, I want to see if you can get on your own. The main question I want to explore with these lines is, what information do we need to know to create a line? And the activity that I did in class was I had people draw a line on a blank sheet of paper, and then I had them write a description for how to draw their line. So I want you to think about this. If you drew a line, and then I came in with nothing but a piece of paper and your instructions for how to draw the line, would I be able to recreate your line? And what you'll discover if you're writing these directions well is that the first thing that you need is a starting point. And think about that. If you are drawing the line, the first thing that you did was you picked a point to start putting the pencil on the paper. And so you need to make sure that someone is starting at the same place that you're starting to make sure that they're making the same line. Then once you have that starting point, you can give them a direction to go. And you can do this two different ways. One is to give them another point and say, from this point, go in the direction of this other point. But another way is to tell them how steep or not steep, or how close to horizontal or vertical to make the line. And we can do that through slope. Now this might be a little different from what you're used to, but I like to describe slope as change in Y over change in X, because I think it helps connect what's going on in the graph and what's going on in the formula when we get to it. So change in Y over change in X for slope. Now before I go back to talk about the starting point, I want to go through some problems and make sure we understand slope. Remember that slope is change in Y over change in X. And I'm actually going to start over here with number 4. So the question is, from this first point, how do I get to the other point? And remember, we want to measure the change in Y over the change in X. So we'll start with the change in Y. And in this change, I am moving upwards. We are moving up 1. And my change in X, to finish getting to that point, I'm going to move to the right 3. So up 1 and right 3 means that my change in Y is a positive 1, because up is a positive direction for Y. And right 3, right is a positive direction for X. So I have 1 over 3. Going back to the first one, pause and see if you can get it. Counting my change in Y, we're moving down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So down 8. And to count our change in X, from there, we move to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now remember, when we think about our change in Y, down is a negative direction for y. So we want to put -8 over right is a positive direction for x. So -8/5. One thing I don't want to see is the word over as a direction. That's not a direction. Up, down, left, right are directions. And that'll help you figure out whether to make the number positive or negative. These two I want you to try on your own. And if you're able to reduce the fraction, then you should reduce the fraction. Now coming back to the starting point, the thing that we use for the starting point is the y-intercept. So let's talk about what that is. The y-intercept is just where the line, or whatever graph you're making, crosses the y-axis. And that's going to make it have an x-coordinate of 0. Because if you're on the y-axis, that vertical axis, then you're not moving to the left or right at all. So your x-coordinate of left and right directions is going to be 0. It's not moving left or right. So that means the y-intercept will always be a point, an ordered pair, and look like 0, comma, some number. Should always have an x-coordinate of 0. Now I can take my two tools, which are my starting point and my direction, to create an equation for any line. That's called slope-intercept form. The slope is my direction that I go in. My intercept is the point that I start with. Here's the slope. It's attached to the variable. It's attached to x. And then here is your y-intercept. It tells you the y-coordinate of your y-intercept. That's all we have for now. In the next video, we're going to look at how to take this y equals mx plus b, this slope-intercept form, and use it to graph lines and get the equation of the line when we already have the graph. So I'll talk to you next time.